Hello and welcome. If you're watching this is going to be the first video on my YouTube channel. I was a little restricted to the length of time I had when I was uploading on Facebook, so I decided to start a YouTube. And this is going to be the first video of a series that I feel God's been calling me to do, and I've entitled it God Loves Misfits. And I couldn't help but think about the movie Rudolph and the Island of Misfit Toys, you know. That's where the undesirable toys, the broken, the ones nobody wanted anymore, the unworthy ones, the toys that serve no purpose anymore. And I feel like sometimes in life that's how we can all feel. We can have moments in life where, whether it's because things people in life have told us, or things we've told ourselves, or lies from the enemy we've let ourselves believe, we can feel broken, unwanted, like we serve no purpose. I'm a nobody. How could God ever use me? So I'm hoping that throughout this series, as we look at different people who were broken or considered themselves unworthy, or like they could never serve a purpose for God, that we'll see that God can use all of us for a purpose. And that's why I decided to start with the person that I feel like I relate to most in the Bible, honestly, and that's Gideon. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start in Judges chapter 6. And I'm going to be following along with this from the King James Version, but I'm going to kind of word a lot of it myself. And so we see in Judges chapter 6 in the 12th century, about 3,000 years ago, the detailing from the Israelites about when the Midianite armies came up against Israel. And we're going to start in verse 2 through 6. And it says that the hand of Midian had prevailed against Israel. And because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made themselves places to hide in the dens, in the mountain, and in the caves, and in the strongholds. And it's when Israel had sown their crops that the Midianites would come up with all the people of the east and come up against them. And it said they would encamp against them and destroy the increase of the earth, would destroy their crops until there was no food left in Israel for their sheep or their ox or their livestock. And it said that the Midianites would come up against them with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude, for both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. So we see that the Midianites, they're not just coming and taking food and leaving. They're coming up with their tents, and they're setting up camp, and they're feeding their livestock. So by the time they leave, they've gotten the crops from Israel, and they've fattened up their livestock while they're there. And by the time they leave, not only is there no food for Israel, they can't slaughter their cattle because their cattle's been starved out too, because the Midianites have fattened up their cattle and their livestock, and what the Israelites have left is a bunch of starved cows. And it says that Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. So they're being greatly impressed by the Midianites here, and they've got nothing left, and they're crying after God for help, which is when we're going to see Gideon come into play. And starting in verse 11, it says that an angel of the Lord came to Gideon while he was threshing wheat in the winepress to hide from the Midianites. Now, threshing wheat, that would be to separate the grain from the stalks, and normally they would do that out on flat field, out in the open, so the wind could help separate the grain from the stalks. But we see here that he's in a wine press doing it, and a wine press would have been like a hole in the ground, like a pit. And so instead of being out in the open, he's down in this pit, hiding from the Midianites to thresh out his grain. And while he's hiding in this pit, it says an angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. So we see here's this man who is so terrified to be out in the open threshing his wheat that he's hid down in a pit, in a hole, because he's so afraid. And yet this angel of the Lord comes to him and says, You mighty man of valor. And I think that's just a good example to us of how, despite what we think of ourselves sometimes, it's not us who label ourselves. It's God who says what you are. So we might consider ourselves unworthy, like we have no purpose, like we can't serve God, but If God says mighty man or woman, then you're a mighty man or woman. If God says you're loved, then you're loved. If God says you're forgiven, you're forgiven. If God says you have a purpose, then you have a purpose. And our purpose is to help save lost souls. That is our purpose. So just like God's about to do with Gideon here, when God says go out to battle and save the enemy, that's what you do. And so Gideon said unto him, if the Lord be with us, then why has all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles that our fathers told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us, and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. And that shows something that I feel like we could all relate to in life, to where when hard times come upon us, when the struggles and troubles of life start to come, we can feel like, where is God? Where is God in all this mess and trouble that I'm having in life? And Gideon's asking, where are the miracles that our fathers told us about how he brought us up out of Egypt, how he parted the Red Sea? He's like, because right now I'm not seeing any provision or miracles from the God. I feel forsaken. I feel like God has abandoned us. I feel alone. But God tells him, he said, go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent thee? And I feel that's a good example there too, because he's saying, go and you will save Israel. If you'll just go in the purpose I've called you in, people will be saved, which is what God calls all of us to do. Go out and save people. And he tells them, have I not sent thee? How could you fail? If God has sent you out on this purpose, and God is with you, and this is what God has called us all to do, then how can we fail in answering the call to go out and save people, if it's what God has sent us out to do? And then, but then watch how Gideon responds. He says, Lord, how shall I save Israel? He says, my family is poor in the tribe of Manasseh, and I'm the least in my father's house. He said, how am I supposed to save anybody? My family is one of the poorest in my tribe, and I'm the weakest, most incapable one in my family. You couldn't have picked the lower of the low. You picked one of the lowest families, and the lowest one in that family, and you expect me to save people. But the Lord says to him, surely I will be with you, and you shall smite the Midianites as one man. And so we just see here how afraid, insecure, unconfident. Not that I even so much think that Gideon is in God, but he has no faith in himself. But it says that Gideon brings out an offering and sets it on the rock, and this angel of the Lord burns the offering up on the rock, sets it on fire up in a blaze. And this is one of the first signs that God was going to show Gideon. And Gideon even proclaims to himself, he sees this fire burning up his offering, and he says, I have seen an angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord tells him, do not be afraid, for I will be with you, and you shall not die. So this is the first sign that Gideon's seeing. And Gideon tells God tells Gideon to go take down this altar of Baal, this false worship to this wicked god Baal, and to build an altar to God. And even after seeing this sign and seeing this offering burn up, Gideon is still afraid. He's so afraid that the only way he can even bring himself to go take down this altar that God has called him to take down is to go and do it by hide again and do it under the cover of nightfall so he doesn't get caught. And it says when the people find out that they wanted to kill Gideon, and the only reason he was spared is because his father comes out and defends him. So God has seen this sign from Gideon, and but Gideon goes to God again in verse 36, and he says, if you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I'm gonna place this wool fleece on the threshing floor. And if there's dew only on the fleece, and the rest of the ground is dry, then I'll know that you'll save Israel by my hand. And that's exactly what happened. Gideon wakes up, and only the wool fleece has dew on it. Only the fleece is wet, and the rest of the ground is dry, just like Gideon asked for. So now Gideon's got, after seeing this offering be burned up with fire, and now he's asked God for this other sign, and God's shown it too. But Gideon comes back to God and says, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me once more to test with the fleece. But this time, make the fleece dry, and the rest of the ground covered with dew." He says, so this time do it backwards. So here, Gideon's saying a sign, and he's like, okay, no, wait a minute. I'm still not sure. I'm still in some weak faith with a lot of doubt right now. So let me get a second sign. So God performs this second sign, and Gideon's like, okay, God, don't be mad at me. I'm still scared. I'm still down here. Give me a third sign. But what we see here is even in Gideon's weak faith, even in his doubt, God's not angry. God understands that Gideon is afraid, that he's having trouble with his faith and with doubts. And instead of getting angry, God just keeps answering these requests to build up Gideon's confidence. And I think that shows us that in times where we have weak faith and we have doubts, that God understands that. Not only does he not understand it, he knows our humanity. He knows we're going to doubt. He expects it, that we are going to have times where we doubt and we're afraid and we're not sure. And that he's patient. He's patient with us even when we're in moments of doubt and weak faith. But I feel like sometimes, I can feel ashamed and pray to God and say, oh, forgive me for this doubt. Forgive me for this weak faith. I can feel like Gideon, God, don't be angry at me. But this goes to show that God's not always angry. God's not always mad. God's not always disappointed. He knows. He knows our humanity and how we're going to be. And He knows how to be patient with us. And to build up our confidence in times like this. So Gideon goes on here. And God tells Gideon gets this army together. And he's getting ready to go fight the Midianites. He's finally got his faith built up. God's built up his confidence to where he's hoping that God's going to go with him to go through to this battle. But God tells Gideon that this army that he has, that there's too many. There's too many people in the army. Because if the Israelites win, they're going to think they did it all by themselves. And God needs them to know that it was Him that gave them the victory. So He said, go out and tell the people, if any of y'all are scared and you want to leave, now's your chance. So Gideon goes out and tells them, and 22,000 men go back home. We don't want no part of this. So that leaves Gideon with 10,000 men to go and fight this battle with. So he's lost 22,000 men already. Here's 10,000 left. And God tells him, still too many. Y'all are still going to think that y'all did it on your own, and I need you in this difficult time to understand another faith building exercise, that it was me that's carrying you through this. It's me that's calling you. It's me that's leading you to victory. So God tells him, He says, there's still too many. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the men down to the water. And there's going to be some of them that kneel down on their hands and knees and start slurping the water up out of the river. And there's going to be some that start scooping up water in their hands, and the Bible says lapping it up like a dog. And I can't help but feel like Gideon might have been, surely you don't want me to take the ones that's dog lapping, do you? But God's like, yeah, those are exactly the ones I want you to take. And it kind of seems odd, like the dog lapping people ain't really who I want on my side, but there's actually something deeper in that, because the ones who are lapping like a dog, they got their head up. They're on watch for what's around them. These ones who are kneeling down They're letting their guard down. They're defenseless. They're exposing their back. But these men that are lapping up out of their hands, they're up. They're looking around. And that's something I think a sign that God's trying to show us in this story is like, you don't want to let your guard down. You don't want the people around you that's got their guard down. You want to be up, watching your surroundings at all time, aware that there's danger, aware that there is an enemy out there. And you don't want to be letting your guard down. You want your guard up at all times, eyes open, looking around. And that's the men that God tells Gideon to take with him. The ones that are on high alert and aware that there's an enemy out there. And we have an enemy out there. And in the same way, we don't need to be bending down, letting our guard down, distractions from the world, comfort, thinking that we're saved. We need to be up and vigilant of our surroundings and aware that there is an enemy lurking out there that we need to be aware of. So, finally, once Gideon's down to 300 men only, God says, these are the ones that I want you to take. And even then, Gideon, after all these signs, God gave him a sign through the burnt-up offering. He's showed him 2 different signs through the fleece. He showed him a sign through these men that he wants him to take. And Gideon's still afraid. But God tells Gideon that if he's still afraid, to go down and spy on the enemy camp. So that's what Gideon does. He's still afraid, so he goes and he sneaks down to the camp at night, and he hears one of the Midianite soldiers talking about how he's had a dream that Gideon's going to come and the Israelites are going to be victorious. So then what Gideon decides to do is he takes his men and he splits them up into 3 different companies, and he gives them all trumpets, and they all put torches down in these pitchers, and he sets them up around the Midianite camp, and he says, when I tell you to, we're all going to blow the trumpets and shout. We're going to throw these pitchers down with these torches in them, and we're all going to shout out. And so they sneak down to the camp at night while the Midianites are sleeping. They surround them in 3 different groups, and then in the middle of the night they blow the trumpets. They all shout out from all these different directions. They throw these torches down. So then you got to imagine fire is spreading out around the camp in different spots in different directions. And the Midianites wake up in the middle of the night, and all they know is they hear screaming from 3 different directions, trumpet from 3 different directions. There's a ring of fire around them, and they think they're surrounded. And they don't know that there's only 300 men. They don't know how many they are. So they wake up in a panic, frightened. A bunch of them start running, trying to flee, so they start running away. The other half have woke up in such a confusion that they're accidentally turning their swords on each other in the dark, in the middle of the night, killing each other. And Gideon winds up victorious. So here we see this man, afraid, insecure, feels unworthy, the lowest of the low, feels like he has no purpose, feels like there's no way God could use him. And on top of feeling insecure and unworthy, and like he could serve no purpose to God, he's a coward, scared constantly, doubting. I need reassured. I need reassured. I need a sign. I need another sign. God, don't be angry at me. I need one more sign. And yet God still uses him. Like I said at the beginning, I feel like I can relate to Gideon so much throughout this whole story. There's times in my life where, like in the beginning, I can feel like, all these troubles in life. Where is God? And yet God's making provision. And I can have times where I feel insecure. How could God use me? I'm so low. Most of you know that I'm paralyzed from a car wreck, from the chest down, from drinking and driving, so I can feel so much shame from choices I made, past sin, past mistakes. How could God possibly use somebody low like me? But it's just like when Gideon was hiding and afraid, and God called him a mighty man of valor. We are not what we label ourselves. We are what God calls us to be. And if God says that you have a purpose, which is to go out into the battlefield and save people, then you can do it just like God told Gideon, I'll be with you. Have I not sent thee? How could you not be victorious when I've deemed what you are, when I've called you to do something for me? How could you not win? And then we see throughout all this that even when Gideon is struggling with his fear and his doubts, God reassures him. He comforts him. He's there for him. And he leads him to victory despite being an insecure, doubtful, weak faith, scared person. And so Gideon's a misfit. He's out there feeling like a broken, unwanted, useless toy. And yet God builds him up with purpose and confidence and sets him out on the battlefield to save people's lives. When it comes around to the end, the people of Israel come to Gideon and they say, you've done a great thing. God is obviously with you, so we want you to rule over us, both you and your son. We want you to rule and your son after you to rule. But Gideon tells them, he says, I will not rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. And it says that afterwards, in the days of Gideon, they lived in peace for 40 years. So I would just encourage you that not to believe what the world tells you. Not to do, a big one is to not believe what you tell yourself sometimes. We are our own worst enemy. And I find that it's more often myself telling myself that I can't be used. Who's going to listen to me? How could I help anybody? More than anybody else in the outside world has ever told me anything about myself. So I would just try to remember that if God says, I have a use for you, which He has for all of us, then there is a purpose for you out there. We all have a unique set of skills and talents and abilities that God wants to use out in the battlefield to save lives. And it takes all of us. There are people that I can reach that others may not be able to. There might be people that will listen to me that's not going to listen to somebody in a suit and tie. There's people you may be able to reach that wouldn't listen to a preacher in a suit and wouldn't listen to me either, but they may listen to you because your story and your personality and your gifts and your talents may resonate in a way that they wouldn't listen to anybody else. So it is up to us to take the purpose that God has given us, the unique skills that He's given us, and to not label ourselves, but to go in what God's called us to do. So, thank you.